So now I have my chance by talking with people who are very much a part of what spirit is all about. And my guest is Mr. James Hamilton, and some of you have seen him before and heard him on the show. And we deal with basically working, first of all, from concepts of his book, Visionaries Thrive at All Times, to a new perspective that he has in core resonance, and going out and talking a little bit about that. So I'm going to give and let him share his vision of the universal mind at work. And what I'm taking out of this are some quotes, or I'm going to some quotes from his ultimate personal performance for the 21st century. And we're going to be looking at how we as individuals will be able to touch that 21st century technology, 21st century visuality, and 21st century spirituality. Now, we're going to be looking at basically one of the focus points that he's come to, and he talked about on his other interview here at this other show that we've done, and has told us about his own development and exploration. And what we're going to be doing now is looking at more of this. And I'm going to start with a question. And that question is, Jim, what do you mean by core resonance training? Can you explain that to our audience? Can you explain it to individuals who want to know what we can do?
Well, first off, again, a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you.
I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy becoming familiar with doing this kind of a format, a question and answer, and getting used to cameras and all this kind of thing. It's very I'm appreciative of this. So, core resonance training, first off, comes around the idea that our core is very important to us. Our core could be our beliefs and our values and this and that, but what it really is, our core is about our connection with innate intelligence, because without our core, we're nothing. And so core actually stands for coherence and resonance. So it's interesting that and it also, of course, is the core of us, our the innateness of us. And so what I've come to see, and I talked about, I was in Brazil and I got caught up in a flood. I showed up a couple days before the flood started. It was 122 people died. I was right there on the edge of it, luckily the edge of it, but it affected everything. And I noticed that as people's environments deteriorated, of course everybody handled their affairs, but it's easy to get caught up in the trauma of the experience, and it's very easy to lose sight of your center. And if innate intelligence is a powerful part of your life, which it is for everybody anyway, it's just a lot of us don't have awareness of it. We spend a lot of time reacting to things and this and that. And what I learned in this flood environment is that this was a very powerful experience of not wanting to let my surroundings cause me to react to them, and staying centered and staying in connection with my core and innate intelligence this is what I learned. And this is what I saw in a microcosm, and we know the whole world's in a certain kind of cataclysmic decline, or there's a shift going on, and so we don't want to get bound up in the shift. We want to stay in our center. So core resonance training is about how to do that. Now, the essence is that our nervous systems are like an antenna, and our connection with source becomes available through this antenna system connection. And our brain is the biggest single part of our nervous system, and our brains are noisy, and we have, what you might say, beta frequencies running on their own, and high beta, and we have anxiety, and a lot of people aren't able to turn their focus off. We want to be in presence, and instead they're focused, and they can't stop their focus. They move into anxiety. Core resonance training is about how to clean up the brain so that the frequencies kind of get back in alignment with the way they're supposed to be. And the brain quiets down, and this connection with innate intelligence becomes more available. That's what core resonance training is.
In some ways, it's getting us to still ourselves, to quiet ourselves, to make us allow that correspondence, that being
That
able to...
natural state that's
Okay.
there to become more available.
And so in many ways, it is available to everyone, no matter what, as long as we draw into and begin to quiet ourselves. And as you talk, I'm sure there are going to be ways that you can suggest things that you know and you've experienced and you've been working on in order to make that more available to individuals in our society, so that we can come out of it feeling very much at peace with and at one with innate intelligence. Now, I want to take a quote again from Jim's passages here, and this is from his core resonance focus, and it says, "But let it be stated that core training only puts the brain into an environment that allows the brain to revise itself, to mirror itself, the feedback part of the neurofeedback, for the purpose of reestablishing and refining its own organization. It is in this mirror of itself that the brain becomes able to reestablish coherence at all new levels of connection, something it seemingly cannot do without this one-to-one feedback and mirroring effect." And that's a pretty intense statement. It's a pretty strong statement. So for those out there who may not have any kind of background or experience in this, can you kind of share a little bit about what you're talking about with that? How would you define that? How would you say that in simple terms?
Well, first off, that's quite a mouthful, you might say. There's a lot covered there, and without context, I guess that's why we're going to figure out what I said there. First off, normally, when most people, we accomplish a certain amount on our own, but often we look to outside help for solving problems. We go to doctors, we go to universities, we study the world out there, and we attempt to apply it in our lives. And what core resonance training is about, and core training is short for core resonance training, is we're actually putting the brain into an environment where it revises itself. Nobody with a lab coat, nobody with a clipboard, nobody with a string of letters and accolades behind their name, and nobody with the background of a pharmaceutical company is sitting there and saying, well, this is what you need, and we're going to fix you up, and we want you to take this many pills, and you'll be fine. So what we're doing instead, and we know that the brain is an important component of the nervous system. It's not the nervous system by itself. It's an important component. And when it's out of whack, when you got static and noise, our connection with innate intelligence is impaired. And the only way to clean the brain up is to let the brain do it itself. The brain's got the capacity, and what keeps it from doing it normally is the brain interfaces with the world through the mind. So the brain is in here, the world is out here, and the mind, the belief systems, our values, all that kind of stuff, the brain filters the world through the mind. So it doesn't get a very clean sense of what's out there. So what we do is we use advanced core resonance training is about using advanced variations of neurofeedback, which allow the brain to interface with itself, and as the brain comes to understand the mechanism that we've provided for it, as it becomes able to see itself, it starts cleaning itself up. It's kind of like somebody that goes from being blind to being able to see. Of course, the excitement of being able to see, but the utilitarian aspect of it is they're going to start cleaning up what they couldn't do before, because now they can see. They'll clean up the path between the bed and the bathroom, and they'll start organizing their life. Now, with our work, with our versions of neurofeedback, what we're doing is providing a mechanism where the brain can see itself, and in its ability to see itself, it starts reorganizing itself.
Now, what is that mechanism?
Okay. I'm trying to decide where to start, but in essence, what we do is we work with electrodes, and electrodes, all they do is pick up frequencies in the brain firing. That's all. It's like little microphones. That's all they do is pick up frequencies firing. And they pick them up and they pass them into an amplifier, and the amplifier amplifies the signal, puts it into the computer where it mixes with software. And what we do is we take certain frequencies, the frequencies that we're working with in a particular part of the brain, and we match them to certain tones. And then what we do is we send the signal back to the brain through the ears, through the earphones, so that as the brain fires off in a certain manner, basically it hears tones in the ear as a complement to the neurons firing in the brain in a certain way. And if the brain fires off in a different way, it gets different signals back. And so as the brain comes to understand that it's interfacing, as the brain fires in a certain manner and hears certain tones back, it eventually discovers, or quickly discovers, that as it fires, it gets this feedback, and it becomes a mirroring mechanism, which is what the concept of neurofeedback is. The signal coming back is the feedback for the way the brain's firing. And so what we've done is we've revised this and cleaned it up, and the idea is the brain becomes able to identify itself in the way it fires, it starts to clean this up. It's like somebody that's blind, when they can see, they start to organize. And so what's different is we're not relying on somebody outside to dictate what your brain looks like. We're leaving it up to the brain to clean itself up. We're just creating this interface. That's what core resonance training is.
Very, very interesting. And it's in this particular time, there is so much use of tech objects and things that they talk about for the young kids who are busy working on computers and iPods and things like that. And this particular focus, used properly, would enable them to get themselves back in a focus of balance, and allow them to go forward in a very powerful way. Am I right in that?
Well, and when you understand that we're not using the mind to do this. In these exercises, we want the mind to be put aside. So in fact, sometimes we'll give the mind a job so that the brain can interface with the software and have its own experience.
Okay.
So it's important to understand that we're not trained now. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with computer games or this or that, and a lot of what we're doing will move more in the direction of certain kinds of, when I say games, you know, I was explaining earlier today how we work with like a DVD, and when the brain is firing properly and it's getting the signal coming back and it's telling it that it's accomplishing what's being asked to do, the DVD is also playing. And like if you're hooked up in a coherence training and you blink your eyes quite a bit, it'll stop the brain from firing right, and it'll interfere with the signal. And so when this exercise is, so we're talking about the idea of computer games and this and that, but part of working with core resonance is that you can be watching a DVD, and when the brain is firing properly, the DVD will play right. And when the brain is firing poorly, based on the exercising that we're doing, the DVD will stop a lot, and it'll be real choppy. And so when you talk about games, we're moving into the world where we can put the brain into an environment where it fires well. We can actually get a chair, the massage part of a chair to work when you're doing the exercise right. So we're coming into some interesting things.
That's very interesting, and I'm sure everyone out there who has a curiosity about this will kind of tune themselves into it and see if they can find out more about how this works for them.
Right.
And we've talked in the past about music and how it does do this for the human nature and the human being, and now with the core resonance training here, there are other ways of getting to that in a quicker way and perhaps a more dominant way.
Yes.
Which I think will be very, very exciting, particularly for the youth of the time, because they're coming in with a little different insights and focus points than those of us of the older generations have, and they're going to be searching for new ways of getting in touch with this. And it will be very interesting to see how that happens. And just out of curiosity, and if this question kind of avoids the topic, have you worked with children on this?
My background comes from an environment where we've worked with a lot of kids, so absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you have seen progress and seen focus with that?
Yeah, the people that I used to work with, we kept sliding back toward the medical model, and there would be, sudden outbursts of anger like 7-year and 8-year-olds and young kids, and uncontrollable behavior that core resonance type training. See, what happens is when the brain is out of sync with itself, dysfunctional behavior shows up. And so when you clean up the brain, everything, in other words, our reality creating is a product of quality of our connection with Source, and the less connection we have, the more we're on our own, and the more dysfunctional we show up. So whether it's children or older people or everybody in between, we have the same kind of results.
Interesting. Okay, I was just curious because I know so many of what we're calling the indigo children and the diamond crystal children have some problems with connecting to everyday existence without going off in one way or another.
But rightfully so. The world's pretty dysfunctional.
All right,
You
so
come in, you're new, and you go, holy moly, what is all of this? What do you mean I got to sit here for 6 hours and they're going to teach me how to memorize, math tables or the alphabet or whatever? And they're going, this doesn't interest me that much. I can understand that.
All right. So what you're saying again is that their thinking is ahead of us in some ways, and the core resonance will pull them into a more balanced focus so that they can come up with things that we all kind of can learn from.
Well, let's put it this way. The indigo children, they can find themselves in reaction to their surroundings.
Okay.
And see, what we want to do is go beyond reacting. And so core resonance and the kind of work I do can enhance it. Don't forget, I mean, they may have connections beyond and connection with innate intelligence beyond the way we grew up. But even at that, they're still a product of their DNA, their family lineage,
Okay.
and they've still got a brain that's a little squirrely, as we all do. I'm telling you, we've seen enough of this to recognize that everybody's brain is out of whack. It's just normal. And
Okay.
as we're all in overload, and it's getting worse, and so to take young people and help. So what this core resonance is about is helping the brain find its own definitions in its own frequency ranges. See, because ultimately what you want is the brain in neutral. That's the alpha frequency. And we want it to jump into beta when it's supposed to do something. And actually one of the ways they measure how effective a brain is how quickly it jumps back to neutral or back to alpha when it's completed the task that was required of beta frequency. Beta is like focus.
Okay.
So you're in neutral,
All right.
you're in presence. Let's say an indigo kid that's having a good time, and he gets required to do something. He goes into the beta, and the question is how rapidly does he come back to neutral? But if he gets caught up in reaction, then he's off there and he stays out there. So the more we exercise the brain, the more the brain finds the boundaries of its own frequencies, and it has that capacity to come back. One of the terms that's used is self-regulation.
Interesting. All right, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, so it would be interesting to see how this works out. And you have working with children and seeing that it does help them to focus and to come back into a different sense of reality in a way.
And it's interesting, it doesn't take that many sessions to see results, but what you want is long-term. And so that's why it's better to own the gear and to have this certain kind of interface that's available. So it's like building muscles. You go do some exercise for a while and you see a little definition and a little change, and you go back to lax, and what definition you created kind of fades away. So we're thinking, we've made this where people can own this stuff instead of being an enormous amount of money. And so it becomes a long-term way to interact with yourself. And of course there becomes refinements and refinements and more refinements as we learn more about what we're doing. But it's a great base for going forward in your life.
Very interesting. And as we go through some of the other questions that I have here, can take us back to that, and maybe specifically you can kind of give some more input into the techniques and the ways in which you get that out there to people. Well, let me go on to one other question here. Further, most are unaware that the entire nervous system acts like an antenna, an interface for our connection with innate intelligence and the cosmos. I think you addressed that a short while ago here in our conversation. Anything further that you want to say in terms of our of our entire nervous system being an antenna and an interface with cosmos?
Well, I think that what we really are is a nervous system. And the gallbladders and the lungs and the heart and all that stuff is just components to keep the nervous system intact. Because you see, I think that what is real is innate intelligence expressing itself. And it does it through all these different mechanisms. A rose has a simple nervous system, and innate intelligence expresses itself through a rose, and a rose has no resistance. And so a rose expresses in a myriad of fashions. Sight, smell, appearance, on and on. And it brings a lot of pleasure to, it contributes a great deal to its surroundings. And so I believe that the nervous system, the human nervous system, is actually really a fancy funnel for innate intelligence to express itself into this dimension. So the humans, what we really are is walking, living nervous systems or antenna systems for innate intelligence to express itself. And you see, this is where solutions come from for our existence. We've been kind of running on our own, and what we need to do is learn how to clean ourselves up so innate intelligence can express itself in what I call amperage, higher levels, because we have a very sophisticated, our nervous system's like this thick compared to a rose's nervous system being this size. And so we have this capacity to allow innate, as we clean ourselves up, to let innate intelligence express itself with more verve, more dimension, more capacity, more amperage into this dimension. And of course, innate intelligence engenders solution orientation. That's all it is. So the humans are a walking means of innate intelligence to express itself into this dimension. And so as the humans get better at allowing this is where we move into awareness and discover we're not our bodies, we're not our brains, but mechanisms by which innate intelligence expresses itself.
Very, very interesting.
It's my take on things.
Well, I can understand why you're saying that, because it makes a lot of sense in terms of our interpretation of our beingness here and why we're doing what we are and why so many of us are so different in different ways. And if there is that pattern of becoming more attuned, then maybe we'll find that we're able to work more fluently with one another and find a little more peace on the planet than we have through previous centuries of manifesting. Very interesting. It will be definitely very interesting to see what comes out in the human nature as time goes on.
Well, I was telling you, we were talking a little bit earlier, I'm writing an article, it only started a few days ago, the Symphony of Humanity, or the Human Symphony, or something like that, and I compare the idea of how trees, they all exist simultaneous with each other, and tree branches never touch. But they're all there together, and they wave in the wind, and they get their sunlight, and they're grounded in the earth, and this and that, and they all are in sync with each other. And you see, the humans, we haven't learned that yet. We're still using man-made concepts of how to get along together, whether it's capitalism, whether it's socialism, whether it's communism, and so what humans need to learn how to do is adopt a system of success. Instead of making up our own that's bigger than us, we need to learn how to adopt something bigger than us so we can learn how to mesh with each other. And so the symphony that humans can become is once we learn how to mesh with the same way the trees do. We need to move to another level, and it doesn't mean that we give up anything. It means that, well, it does mean we give up a lot. We give up a lot of strife. We give up a lot of, discouragement, a lot of resentment, a lot of resistance, a lot of the fighting.
It's very interesting that you say that. The using it as a symphony of action is something that a lot of people could understand and could feel. And I like that. I hope you write some more about that, because it makes a lot of sense to me. And it's a very good way of explaining what we sometimes forget about, this we are all one, and that we just need to work with one another in ways that are fluent and positive. And creating that human symphony could be extremely important.
I think it's coming. There's people expressing it as ideas on small scales. I mean, there's, like in Santa Monica, there's There's community gardens where people work together. They're running out of garden space, so they're talking about people donating their backyards for gardens and community gardens, and people work together, and it gives them, they're sharing. People are sharing, and they're learning how to go beyond some of the differences in the kind of people in Santa Monica and just, in California and Los Angeles. There's such a broad diversity of people getting along together. I love it. I love to see it. There's so many kinds of people in Los Angeles. There's everybody, every color, hue, shape. I get a kick out of it. So we're learning how to work together, and there's still we're still bigger on our differences than our samenesses, but as we start to discover our samenesses more so, and ultimately when we discover our real sameness is, all of us are a product of connection with innate intelligence. That's what we really are. We're expressions of innate intelligence. And as soon as we start getting that, we'll start moving to new levels of being, and awareness we'll discover that what we really are is awareness.
That's a wonderful thought and a wonderful statement, and it will be interesting to see how this evolves as time goes on. And maybe we won't see it in our time, but those who follow us definitely will, and we probably will too in different ways. We are now, because
we are now,
I hear what you're saying, and I just had a conversation with two ladies from California too who were talking about some of their experiences and that harmony of working in sync with one another and with a group, and just not taking everything so much as this is mine, this is the way I do it, as this is the way we do it, and allow each one to do what they can do and make that symphony. It's an interesting concept, an interesting focus. Let me go back on to one of the other questions that I have here. In this particular way, you become the ever-important intermediary and record keeper for the evidence of your shifts toward wholeness. This is one-on-one experience. It requires a delving within, for you are the visionary. You are the keen observer, and you have the support of the universe at your back as you begin the process of intentional involvement toward growing wholeness. And maybe that in some ways what we were just talking about in terms of the symphony, but you may also have some other things that you'd like to put out there for us.
Yeah, what that specifically addresses actually is part of core resonance training, and it's what I call a daily sessions log. What's interesting is most people don't have a strong sense of understanding of cause and effect. In other words, what you focus on expands, but you see most people don't hold focus very well. And so their ability to really get clear that what we focus on expands and we create our realities by our focus, it's not a very distinct trail, because frankly we're all over the place. But what I'm producing here, what we're producing with core resonance training, is an interface between your brain and your reality creating. Now what I mean by that is, normally in neurofeedback, you go into somebody and they set you up, and maybe they'll do an assessment, and they'll decide what protocols you should use, and so they give you your experience. Now your brain, maybe it does it, but they give you your experience, and they decide what protocols you're going to use. You're not involved in that at all. And so you're expected to be able to identify shifts and changes, and very often you can, because neurofeedback's interesting stuff. But what we've done is we've taken it, so we work with 12 or 13 protocols. I call them designs, but protocols, same thing. And what we do is we have you use them at your own rate and speed and keep track of what you notice. So you'll use a protocol called SHARP, and it's for focus, let's say, or cleaning up the mind, and really it's for cleaning up certain frequencies in the brain. And you write down how you feel before you started the session, you write down how you feel after the session, and you write down what you notice after 24 hours. But the point is, when you do this session, you're monkeying with your brain, so to speak. Now the brain won't do things to itself that hurts itself, so I use the term monkeying kind of facetiously. But you do something, you do a session on your brain, and you're going to notice shift. There's no doubt about it. It may not be really distinct every single time, but what happens is you become the intermediary between cleaning up your brain and seeing the results. And that is very powerful, and it's relatively rare, where people have distinct. So we go back to the scorecard idea. The quality of your reality creating is the quality of your connection with source. So if we start cleaning up the brain, started cleaning up this connection, your realities start to shift, and you're the one that's documenting it. And you've just had a very powerful experience of understanding cause and effect. And you're opening up this connection with innate intelligence to contribute more to the whole thing. So there you are, kind of at the console. I don't want to say you're adjusting the knobs and things, because you're not really dictating the end result in your brain, but you are deciding what to play with. The brain does it, the results show up, and you're keeping track of it. And I think it's a very powerful concept.
I just would ask, perhaps, and the public might like to know that, can you give an example of someone with whom you worked and there was a tremendous shift of consciousness and the brain focused in a very different way, and that person went on to do something that was very different, or maybe relaxed their brain? Or
Can I use me?
Of course you can use
Can I
you.
use me?
What better example do we have?
When I first started doing sessions, which was in 2006, first off, and I'll be truthful, the first thing, in the first 5 sessions, I lost my taste for alcohol and dope smoking, just like that.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Fear and doubt was gone. And the other thing in the first 5 sessions is that my judgment about what I perceived as errors, like I would make a decision to do something and I've discovered I made a poor choice. And normally what you do when you discover you make a bad choice is you react to it or you do something about it. And what I noticed was I would recognize that I had made an earlier decision that didn't work out, and I would just keep going. And I would ignore, and it took a long time to figure out that that was the early phases of non-resistance. And you see, it's in non-resistance that we don't resist. Because you see, when we resist, let's say our errors, that becomes the attention of our focus. And there goes our reality creating down the drain, because now we're resisting what we don't want. So there are stories and stories and stories about what's happened. See, everything I do now is around documenting what non-resistance is. That's what I've been doing for 2 years or 2.5 years, whatever it is. And one of the things I've coined a phrase is smile to smile to smile. You know, you have to go to my website, the Visionaries Lab or coreresonance.com. I wrote something, what is it called? Oh, that's right, I have an ebook, Core Resonance Training. It's an ebook, a free download. And I talk about a number of examples of experiences I had where in non-resistance to a circumstance or something that I experienced, the thing came out beyond anything I ever could have comprehended. Because normally I would resist what was going on, but as you get into the smile to smile, and it's not a mind-driven thing. When you clean up the brain, you start letting innate intelligence in, you start letting innate guidance, that's a term I created because this is what I'm experiencing. You start having more horsepower to process your surroundings. You don't have to react to them. And if you don't react to them, you don't get spun off by reacting to what somebody said, or somebody flipped you a finger in the car or whatever, and you're not reacting to things, and the world is a very different place. And the world is in order, if but you could see it. And when we're reacting, we're not going to see it.
Very interesting.
So
That's quite a remarkable circumstance of experience, just hearing you talk about how this happened and what you did and what happens to you after this training, and how you're able to go beyond the non-resistance and get involved with going forward.
you know, it's interesting, the alcohol thing has always been around, and I've always been, you know, I was a yacht broker for many years, I was in the restaurant business for many years, and I've always been, when I say kind of a hard drinker, I think sometimes the more intelligent you are, the more you need to self-medicate. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so drinking's always been part of my life. And ever since the beginning of starting with neurofeedback, which I have evolved into my version of it, based on the experiences I've had and what I'm trying to replicate for other people, alcohol is so very optional. I finally went back to drinking at a very social level but I've never, ever since the core, or the training that I started with, has it ever been, I used to feel like once you start drinking, you might as well have a few. I mean, no, it's beers and this and that, but I used to tend to overdo it, or I was capable of overdoing it. It was kind of, and so playing with your brain waves is interesting, and as the brain starts to clean itself up, these variations of self-medicating need to cover up your feelings, go away, because your feelings start to shift, and as they move upscale, the need to fight with them becomes a moot point.
Very interesting. I'm going to ask you one more question. Have you ever dealt with someone who has had brain damage and is trying to refocus into what we would call a normal pattern, or has that not come up for you?
Well, we're trying to get people out of normal patterns. Just kidding. We
I know, but you know what I mean.
We don't want more normal people. The truth of the matter is, the brain has a huge amount of plasticity, and the sooner that people can start training, the brain works around its problems more effectively. But always, you see, problems are problems are problems. And the source of them, I will say that some things are more significant and more difficult to work with, but see, it starts with the intention. Most people spend their lives reacting. There's no intention there. People that really want to solve their problems, that's the beginning of where it all starts. And so you get into variations in neurofeedback and core training and this and that, and all of that becomes an adjunct to getting where you want to go. Will you be normal when you're done? You know, we hope not, but will you be different? Will you have accomplished something? Will you have a sight and a capacity to capacity for perception that was unavailable to you before? Will you be more whole? Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious about that, whether you had any way of looking at that and coming up to, you know,
the people I used to work with, we actually had somebody that worked with somebody that was in a total coma. They had the worst kind of a stroke or something. This isn't the kind of stuff I follow. My interest is bumping consciousness, actually substantially, if at all possible. But a woman totally in a coma. It took a long time, but she's back walking, and I mean, her brain was able to identify the feedback, and it started ever so slowly cleaning itself up.
Wonderful.
And so it's not the area I specialize in, but when you put the brain into an environment where it can see itself, it will start organizing.
Interesting.
It'll work around its problems. It's got a lot of capacity to do that.
Well, that will be very, very interesting to see as maybe more and more people become aware of this and work with this, how things will change and how people will be able to balance more through this experience. And that's, well, you may have already answered the next statement there, but what are the components of core training? If someone wanted to get some core training, what would they have to do? How would that happen? Is there a particular way, or is it just something that people just are introduced to or can be introduced to?
All right, well, first off, what I would do is my website, visionarieslab.com, visionaries lab.com, is my primary site. And Core Resonance is the site that addresses this core resonance training. And the ebook is there, and there's an article. I think actually it's the one we're working from right now is Core Resonance Training, What Is It?
Right.
But what's really significantly different is that you own the gear yourself. There's not much of that out there, and certainly not much of it oriented toward bumping consciousness. And you see, most people that do neurofeedback, they go to a doctor or a psychologist or somebody who specializes in it, and it's very effective. It's very effective for post-traumatic stress. It's effective for anxiety and sleep disorders and all these kinds of things. But usually you go to somebody and you have that third party, and I'm not making little of that because a lot of people, that's their comfort, and they want to have somebody to interface with like that. My focus is for people to own the equipment and do this on themselves. And they can't hurt themselves. The brain is in charge. The brain has a survival mechanism that's very powerful. It's not going to do stuff that's at odds. I mean, you could conceivably work yourself into a headache if you really tried to, push this and try to force the brain to address something in a certain manner. But so the idea is to own the equipment. We're not talking that much money, $3,800. I mean, I went from selling gear that was $40,000.
Okay.
That's where I learned what I learned. Was I set up a bunch of offices quite a bit. And I got to see, especially from my perspective, as I was selling this from a perspective of what we could do to advance ourselves. And so I got to see a lot of interesting things. I got to see what I call innate intelligence sticking to the walls. I mean, we were changing energy in houses and in office environments, because when you clean up this connection with innate intelligence, it comes through. I'm telling you, it sticks to the walls. I wrote about this in the e-book, I think, and also probably this particular article, and all that's on core resonance. So the answer to the question is, we're set up for people to own the equipment, and what they have to bring is the intention and the willingness to be the you part, to be that intermediary between, I shouldn't tease and say monkeying around with their brain, but putting the brain into an environment where it has an opportunity to express itself through itself, and recording the results that you get. In other words, your realities start to shift. You're less confrontational. You start to see more symmetry, more synchronicity. People start complimenting you on maybe you stand differently now. And there's a whole world that as you clean this up that shows up out here. And so what we want is people that have that intention of wanting to have more in their life and are willing to be responsible, and we'll show them how to get in the driver's seat where they can introduce exercises to their brain, and their job becomes to document what they experience so they can discover, for example, which protocols they like, because we want you to do the stuff that feels good.
Oh, wonderful.
And so we're not pushing you to do the things that are hard. We want you to do the stuff that's easy and the stuff you enjoy, and then you'll adventure into the other ones at whatever rate and speed, and you'll learn how to use the DVDs and the videos and take this. So it becomes a lifetime experience that starts at some point, and it could be by coreresonance.com. Be in touch with me. And I think it's inexpensive.
Okay. Well, this is what I was curious about, and it is ongoing. In other words, when one gets into it, it can go on as long as you want it to go and do what it's going to do for you.
Well, think about it this way. Let's say we get a field of people, and again, the normal medical model of neurofeedback is a medical model of working with people with Parkinson's, and I mean all these different kinds of quote-unquote diseases, all these different kinds of dysfunction. And so I don't think that the bar is held very high. They're trying to fix problems. So that's well and good, and there's a lot of that in the world, and somebody needs to do that. But I'm interested in bumping people to new levels.
Interesting. Okay. And those of you out there who are interested, please feel free to contact Jim at his website, or look at what he has and make some decisions on parts of what is there, because it's fascinating to see what he has done with this and what they want to do with it.
And so the point I was starting to make is that as more of us start using this for bumping consciousness and advancing ourselves and cleaning ourselves up, see, what we're doing is we're allowing innate intelligence to express itself more in this field that we're playing in. So there'll come advancements in designs and protocols and designs and these exercises, and there's stuff that's undreamt.
Okay.
That'll become available. That's why this becomes a lifetime of monkeying around with our brains. See, there comes a point when we discover that we're not our brain. We know we're not our body, most of us by now. And when we discover we're not our brain, and our brain is a piece of technology, and that we can tune it, except that we learn how to let it tune itself. We don't tune it. You see, that's the important part. And I think we'll find that there's no limit to what we can do to clean up this capacity to interface with innate intelligence. Knocking down the noise in the brain is what coherence means.
Okay.
It's like a signal. When you're talking with somebody cell phone to cell phone and you got a really bad signal, that's an incoherent signal. Coherence is when you have a really a good sounding signal. And so when you get coherence, then you get resonance with the cosmos.
Okay, that I can understand that on a meditative cycle just by the experience of meditating, and I know this takes it another level, and it makes sense in terms of what you're saying, because once you learn to turn off a certain part of your thinking processes and let yourself go into that consciousness raising process, you do move in a different way. And with this technique, I think it would be rather interesting to experience and to see what goes forward with it.
Where I've said, I've glimpsed, I get to glimpse a lot of things, and luckily I'm writing, so I get to write things down. I spend a lot of time, I don't think journeying is really a good word, but maybe it works. Gee, I forgot what I was going to say. It's too bad. It's something quite interesting. It's too bad.
Well, think about it a moment. I'll throw out another
All right,
question
good,
to you, and
good.
it may come back to what
All
you
right.
wanted to say.
It was a good one.
You'll remember it. And one of the other points here, by the simple act of introducing the brain to itself at the cusp of the 21st century and allowing it a means by which it cleans its own house, humanity, first a few and then others, begin to take their rightful places as conscious contributors to the unfolding of the potential of planet Earth. Do you want to go into that a little bit and talk about that? Because I think that's a pretty big statement, but yet at the same time, it's a statement that says what it is that you're envisioning, what it is that you're working forward to doing. And this is something that is very, very powerful. So,
Well, it's like, in a way, I've covered it. What we really are, in my belief, and what I've come to see and what I've glimpsed, is that what we really are is means by which innate intelligence expresses itself. We're a very sophisticated nervous system. I don't know if dolphins or any of the animals have a more sophisticated nervous system than humans. I don't think so. I know there's some other intelligences that are out there that are pretty refined. But if nothing else, the humans have a capacity, and like I said, a nervous system that's this much capacity, this much amperage, this potential amperage to flow through into this dimension. And I believe that what we really are is living antenna systems, or living mechanisms by which innate intelligence expresses. In other words, innate intelligence is what's expanding in the universe. It's expressing itself, and it does it through all the different means. And we're one of those means. And as we learn how to open ourselves up and let it occur, for one thing, it feels great.
okay.
You know, this is what joy is. This is what, I was in a relationship, and I was with a woman who was able to, when I say receive me completely, I'm not talking about sexually, I'm talking about my ability to flow energy to her was complete. There was no resistance, and what it did was it made her full, and then she, in her fullness, was able to express back to me. And so that made both of us very whole. And so there's this learning how to express ourselves that's becoming very important, and allowing innate intelligence to direct this is our success, our upcoming success as a species. And I think we're far closer to it than we think.
Okay, so this is a rather powerful focus on what we are moving towards with this, and how this in the 21st century, and it makes a lot of sense to me, even though I don't have the total picture of what this is all about in a total way. It makes sense to me, and I think the fact that it's allowing each of us to go into our wholeness and then mesh on one level or another. And I like that concept again of the symphony of the world, the fact that by each of us becoming more whole, becoming more focused with innate intelligence, becoming more, in some ways, perfect, we're able to move as a society into a consciousness level that's going to allow us to reach out in a total different way as humanity. And this is one of the mediums that we could use very much to create that for ourselves and for others by just becoming in some way in contact with this processing.
So imagine me, now see, I'm not, it's not that I'm taking credit for this, that's not the point. Imagine me, luckily, when I was 23 years old, and I told you a long time ago, my dad's gone now, but he thought that humility would come to me by, I need to have my arm this far up people's toilets. I would learn humility, and that's what my dad thought I needed. But imagine me at 23 years old learning how to meditate, and ultimately, in my period of years, and we know I barely got out of high school, my English teacher let me out, so I don't have formal education. I have a meditation education where I've been playing with, interfacing with the cosmos for a long time, and luckily so. But imagine me at the end of this 36 years of meditating and working with a couple of physicists and writing a book and the different things I've done, now expressing, allowing innate intelligence to express through me at this level. And now I have technology to help other people allow themselves to open up to let innate intelligence express through them.
That's the beauty of your life and the beauty of your experience. And it's what you have found in your path. You've learned to communicate with innate intelligence and have given, as I said to you when we were talking about some things, has given you the ability, the focus, to express what you need to express for humankind in terms of getting everyone to become more attuned to that innate intelligence that will guide them. And this again is why I say to anybody who is interested, pick up Visionaries Thrive at All Times, go on to Jim's website and just take a look at this. I think you're going to find that it does and says a lot of things that will make very much sense to what's going on in this particular time. And is there one thing or a couple of things? We're running out of time. Is there anything that you want to say sort of as an ending to maybe suggest to those out there who themselves are looking to do something differently, who might want to reach out and take a look at this and try and see where they want to go with and to innate intelligence?
You know, there's something that came to mind I'd wanted to mention. If something comes up real quickly, and that's that I have always translated complicated to simple. As a yacht broker for 15 years, my love of sailing, I would help people into their first boats, which often was 150,000 back then, 20 years ago. And so translating complicated to simple has always been what I've done. It's my knack. But the other thing I wanted to mention real quick is in allowing, we think we lose, but we don't. What we gain, there is no loss in allowing. Trees in a forest, in allowing, everybody expresses itself. And there's always a thought that shortage comes from allowing. And unconditional love, allowing, non-resistance is the way everything goes forward. It's our success.
That's a wonderful way to summarize your whole perspective here. And I again, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And hopefully we'll get you back on again to talk some more about your vision and your focus and what's been happening for you. But in the interim, for those of you who out there who have something to say that you'd like to share, please feel free again to contact us and to come forward into seeing the AM light and becoming part of the AM light and expressing what we all need to know. Thank you very much to my guest, and thank you out there to those of you who are watching.
Namaste.
Namaste.